Do you need more than one limited liability company as a residential real estate investor? Well, in this video, I'm going to be answering that question for you. All right, let's get started. Okay, so what really wanted me to cut this video on how many LLCs we need stems from a recent interview I did with an individual about setting up limited liability companies when you start real estate investing. And in fact, when he was questioning me on this one topic, he started from the position of where I used to be when it comes to protecting residential real estate. And that was, he asked me about the equity in the property and how much equity would I recommend you place in a limited liability company. And so the thing about LLCs and whether or not you need 1 or 5 or 15 LLCs in your planning comes down to what are your goals. And see, this is where I think a lot of people out there that talk about LLCs get it wrong because they don't understand the motivations of a residential real estate investor. Why are you buying? If you're not flipping property, well, even if you are flipping property, you would need multiple LLCs. But if you're buying residential real estate, what are we buying them for, right? Is it for equity or is it for income? You see, when I was talking to this individual, when he brought up the equity approach, really what he was saying was this. And again, I was guilty of this earlier on when I first started practicing. Hey, maybe I put 4 homes in one LLC. And the rationale for doing this is, number one, LLCs are complex. No, they're not. Okay, rationale number 2, oh, it's going to make my life more difficult if I have more than one LLC. No, it won't. Okay, where do you come up with these ideas? Well, I heard from so-and-so that it made his life more difficult. Well, until you know the circumstances of what created that issue for that individual, it's hard to opine on whether or not his idea of structuring an LLC is really reflective of the situation in which he was involved in. And so when you take this approach, like this individual brought up, the equity approach, the total value of equity here is $400,000. What you're saying is this: if something happens with one of those properties, I am comfortable losing all 4, because in the worst case scenario, that's what's going to happen. If something goes wrong with this property right here, they sue the limited liability company as the owner of the property, and then all of those assets are now at risk. And so when we're first starting out and we're starting to grow our portfolios, the risk typically lies in not understanding what you're doing. So you're going to be making mistakes. And so you're bringing more risk onto yourself, which in turn can jeopardize your assets. People who self-manage can make many mistakes not knowing the laws of the city or the state in which they're managing properties because they're not up to date with them. And what they could do 3 years ago, they're no longer allowed to do because it's considered to be discriminatory, for example. And so you can get sued over that. And they go after the asset itself. And so when it comes to protecting our rental real estate, taking this equity approach increases your overall liability exposure. And the idea of using LLCs is to limit the liability exposure. And so I often tell people, hey, why are we investing? We're investing in rental real estate for income. So this is the approach that I take with my investor clients, is that when you're starting out, you definitely want to take and set up one LLC per property. Because people say, hey, I'm just getting started. Why do I need more than one LLC? Because as I stated earlier, hey, you're going to be probably making some mistakes. But more importantly, as you start to build that portfolio, you get up to 5 to 10 properties, that's going to change. That's going to make changes in your life. You're going to start pulling out income. I'm making, $4K a year off this property, $6K a year off that property, $5K a year from this property right here. So now I'm making an additional $15,000 because I started investing. In year 2, I double my portfolio and that 15 goes to 30K. Just think, if you had an additional $30,000 that you're bringing in every month, does it change your life? And I don't mean from the standpoint of you're going to be able to go out and buy a bigger house, but the little things. Maybe it's vacations. Maybe it's your spouse is able to quit her job and focus more on the real estate or go part-time. Maybe you're able to send your kids to private school. Whatever the reason is that you started investing, that's all dependent upon protecting these little income generators. And so when you take the income approach, your idea or your strategy should be, I want to preserve as much as the income from my real estate portfolio as possible. so that if something were to happen with my $4,000 property, yeah, the equity here is 100K. This is all I lose. I still maintain these other two assets that are kicking off for me $11,000 a year. So I lost a portion of my income, about a third. But if I'd kept this approach going right here, I would have lost 100% of my income. So those changes that I was able to make in my life, the private school, going part-time, now we have to rethink that. Now we have to go back to where we were before. And so we get pushed backwards rather than continuing to move forwards. So with our investing, when you're starting out, I would tell you this: one property per LLC. Now people say, well, just load up on insurance. You can take on the additional risk if you buy more insurance. I've got videos on that. In fact, I'll cut another one. Insurance is not the choice. Yes, you need it, but you want the LLC as a backstop, because insurance providers, we know that, they're not in the business of paying out on claims. In fact, if you read your policy, which many of us don't, can you understand what's written into your policy? Because there's something called legalese or obtuse language intentionally designed to confuse people. So they think they're protected until they file the claim and they find out that claim's not covered. You still keep it, but appreciate, hey, there are limitations to it. So if I want to build a portfolio, I want to make sure that I am protecting my assets to the greatest extent as possible. Now, as you go beyond this and you get up to 10 and 15 properties, you can definitely take on more risk at that point in time, and you can start putting more assets into LLCs. You can start grouping properties, because now if you lost 2 properties in one lawsuit, hey, it's not going to have the same financial impact as it would when you only have 2 properties. When you have 15 and you lose 2, life can still go on. When you have 2 properties and you lose 2, it makes a significant financial impact in our everyday lives. So when it comes to LLCs, the number of LLCs, this question comes up all the time. I will tell you this: up to 10 to 15 properties, 1 LLC per property. After you move beyond that threshold and your investing starts to take off, then let's talk about grouping, because I think at that time it's warranted. You can start taking on more risk because you're able to absorb that risk in the worst case scenario. Hey guys, if you liked the video, be sure to hit the like button. And if you're not yet a subscriber, subscribe to the channel. This is your opportunity to get updated every time we release new content on asset protection and tax planning for real estate investors.